What if your one and only love was stolen from you in front of your eyes? She pleaded with you to save her, but you were unable to do so. You couldn't move your legs. Both bravery and strength were lacking in you. According to the great wizard, it is all pointless, because everything in our world revolves around power, and even he doesn't know for some reason. They whisk her away. Above all, the power of existence is paramount. And Arudo's life was so profoundly damaged by that day that he devoted his whole life to the quest for power. Over 60 years went by. He made every effort to get to the riches in the most perilous dungeon on earth. And he died there, unsuccessful. He spent his entire life after power. And he stood before God after his death. The right to meet God in the hereafter was gained by whoever had the terror of God. God gave him an option. Choose to permanently rest his spirit or to endure life's agony for a further 20 years. He decides to be reincarnated and go back in time in order to preserve both his life and his one true love. The MC gets his second opportunity in this way. Going back to the moment of his birth, he saw his father, who was still there, and his mother, who was stunning and had long hair. He wanted to begin developing immediately since he was determined not to squander a second of his existence. However, his little body was unable to even stand. The ability to view a system window with his numbers and skills, something he could only see now, was something he lacked in his prior existence. The infant, who was only a month old, was attempting to talk and believed he was doing so. He recalls that God gave him the freedom to select a gift. God clarifies that everyone is endowed with a gift at birth, even though they are unsure of what it meant. Unbalanced intelligence, broken martial arts, ridiculously powerful magic, or even boundless charisma are examples of gifts. It could also be the gift of creative brilliance, or, finally, the gift of invention. Arudo was gifted with wisdom in a previous life. God inquires as to if he desires the same one. The MC states that he is looking for a new present this time, the gift of creativity. The MC, who possessed knowledge from his previous existence, knew about the 5 gifts of the world, but was unaware of God's mention of creation. He thus set his sights on that one. The first thing the MC sees is an unfamiliar system window. Thus, it may be connected to his new talent. The MC remembers his parents, who passed away when he was just 8 years old, in addition to wishing to preserve the life of the person he loved. He hardly recalled it anymore, because it had been so long. On the evening of his 8th birthday, it took place. His community was attacked by goblins. He only recalls being hurt when his father gave his life to allow his wife and kids to go. When that proved insufficient, his mother flung him far away and pleaded with him to at least run by himself. He had no option but to run. Furthermore, goblins are known to be vicious animals. Thus, you may envision what transpired following Arudo's escape. But enough pain and misery for now. He will act differently in his second life. Studying and improving his mental strength and intellect is the first step. Even his mother thought it was awful that he studied so much. He trained his mana stats while making fun of his father. The boy was performing parkour, while children his age were eating mud and painting on the ground. His level of agility and evasive skills increased while other kids marveled. Every time Arudo learned a new skill, this trend persisted. 8 years went so quickly. Sitting under a tree, Arudo refined his natural talent and abilities, which gradually increased in strength. Arudo's mother congratulated him on turning 8 when she got home. She was so happy that she gave her kid such a strong hug that Arudo was afraid he would be crushed. His mother gladly approved of his father's declaration that they would start Arudo's training right away and claimed that he was the source of Arudo's attractive appearance. Arudo agreed when his mother thanked him once again and reminded him of his nightly church visit. Every youngster turning 8 was customarily given a unique bracelet. It was now Arudo's time to get his bracelet, which functioned as a kind of identifying card. Arudo was told to extend his hands by the priest. The priest put a mystical bracelet that proved Arudo's identification on his wrist after he obeyed while standing in the church. The priest said that it would be best to take this to the large metropolis. Take cautious not to misplace it. Now that the bracelet was on his wrist, Arudo finally had an idea. The goblins, who were scheduled to arrive in the settlement in a few hours, then came to mind. Arudo was in tears already. He was aware that he needed to gather himself. The moment had arrived. Arudo decided to preserve this town after recalling his former self. Arudo checked his progress on his skill board after leaving the chapel and arriving at the woodland. He examined his present situation. Arudo pointed out that in order to greatly boost his physical strength, he probably needed to achieve level 15. On the other hand, his magic was at level 32, giving him control over every talent he had acquired over the course of his 8 years. The power to make different useful items was the sole skill that Arudo didn't completely comprehend. He came to the realization that the reason he hadn't used this power earlier was that he didn't have it. Arudo made the decision to activate it after determining that it wouldn't impede him in combat. Arudo became aware that the goblins had already entered the woodland at that point. He swiftly ducked behind a tree when he saw them. There were 3 goblins, probably scouts. Arudo told himself to maintain his composure. In the past, he had vanquished innumerable creatures. The goblins attacked Arudo as soon as they saw him peering out from behind the tree. In his second existence, this would be his first battle. It was time for him to show off his training. Arudo resolved not to regret this time, as he focused his power and considered his everyday efforts. The vill's only chance was him. Arudo attacked the goblins with flames. Arudo had a rush of victory after taking down 1 goblin, but he was aware that it was insufficient. Another goblin attacked from behind as he was fighting the second one. Realizing he couldn't afford to make a mistake, Arudo ducked. Arudo realized he needed to improve his attacks after eliminating all 3 goblins. Fortunately, he hadn't yet come across more powerful beasts. The system showed a level-up signal as soon as Arudo defeated the goblins. Arudo had a surge of fulfillment. He had acquired a level after defeating them. Arudo felt dizzy after leveling up, nearly intoxicated with strength. However, he soon saw another goblin rushing toward him while brandishing a sword. Arudo was hurt by the goblin. Was this truly a new wave of goblins? Arudo pondered. Arudo saw a large horde behind him while he dealt with the current threat. His wounded arm had taken him entirely by surprise. It seemed impossible to fight such multitudes. He felt a familiar wave of sadness. Nothing had altered. Arudo believed that no matter how hard he tried, he was powerless to alter his destiny. His mind flashed back to his beloved, but suddenly a burning determination sprang. Arudo refused to give up. He regretted not trying more. His magic strength suddenly increased to level 50, giving him the ability to use the new talent Grave Reaper. Arudo understood he had mastered the crafting talent when he saw the system window announcing the level gain. He knew that at greater levels, its real power would become apparent. Arudo thought, that's why I couldn't use it before. An army of goblins gathered behind Arudo at that same time. As they prepared to strike, he questioned whether they were aware of his flaws rather than his combat skills. What was in store for him? Arudo was suddenly attacked by a goblin. Realizing how close he was to getting hurt, he barely avoided its blade before unleashing a fireball. With his damaged hand, Arudo found it much more difficult to battle the goblins, and the unrelenting assault grew more intense. This time, a big gang of 8 goblins approached Arudo. Feeling confident in his own power, Arudo used magic to send the goblins crashing down the canyon by activating his grave skill. Had he really succeeded? It was a talent for creating graves. With a glimmer of optimism that his destiny may be altered now that he had saved the hamlet, Arudo looked at his hands and delighted. The system showed a notable level gain at that point, perhaps as a result of the goblins' defeat. He remembered hearing that opportunities to progress and raise one's level were frequently accompanied by growing suffering. Arudo passed out with that notion. Then Arudo opened his eyes. Something fluttered close to his face, and he became aware that he was chilly. Abruptly, he noticed a creature that quickly jumped away. What was it? The head of a gorgeous slime was exposed in front of him. When Arudo noticed the beverage, he questioned if he ought to consume it. Arudo discovered that the fluids from the slime's head was quite helpful. Arudo was drawn to the slime as it kept hopping. This creature, what was it? After seeing it, Arudo came to the conclusion that the slime wasn't a harmful creature. It actually appeared to be pretty amiable. Abruptly, the slime sprang onto Arudo's face. Its touch was very ticklish, and he had no idea what it desired. Before long, Arudo was perched atop a mountain and staring down upon his natal hamlet, a charming little community tucked away in the countryside. The slime signaled something by looking forward, but Arudo said he wouldn't come back. He had a road to pursue and a person to save, but he was still too weak. Maybe it was all futile. One of the best subterranean cities was about a mile distant. His objective was to go as high as he could and take over its higher stories. Then, knowing that only 7 years left before that vanished day, Arudo thought back to his sweetheart and wondered how he might level up. He also remembered the appearance of the city and the challenges and conflicts that were ahead of him. Arudo stood mentally apologizing to his parents for his abrupt departure as the slime crept over him. He explained in a letter that he needed to do a number of important responsibilities. Arudo had to make things right even if he thought this was the end. He is incredibly appreciative of his parents' unending devotion. Recalling his mother and father, he felt happy to have grown up with them. After 8 years, he was content. Tears filled Arudo's eyes as he realized it was time to go. The slime followed him out of his parents' home. Arudo informed it he would go alone since he wasn't sure if it was actually observing him and thought it would be harmful. She would have a hard time protecting herself from monsters. However, the slime suddenly started clapping with its limbs. Arudo decided she could stay near because she appeared so concerned. Arudo and the slime agreed and continued their trek. After vanquishing a powerful wolf a month later, Arudo decided it was time for lunch. Something was pulled along by the muck beside him. Arudo praised the slime after realizing there were new wounds from a new wolf. Then she put a mystical stone right into Arudo's purse. He wouldn't have to worry about money if he had magic stones. The stone was then positioned by the slime. Then it raced away, apparently yelling something. Arudo knew where to go. Had the slime actually provided them with a place to stay overnight? Arudo peered out from behind a peak a bit later. The slime sat next to him. It was a cave, an ideal place to spend the night before traveling to Kinetagri's the following day. While roasting barbecue over the fire, Arudo thought about how the low-ranking monsters here made it simple to acquire food, even without a fight, something he was used to. At last, his body was starting to take on the shape of its former existence, rapidly expanding and unmatched. A system window appeared in front of Arudo a moment later, showing his level as 32 and his steadily improving traits. He reasoned that he might strengthen himself more successfully by raising his level in a dungeon. Arudo ate a kebab while perched on a stone with another in his hand. He saw that the slime that had clung to him was also savoring a kebab. Then, unsure if it would actually eat everything, Arudo fed it rice. Arudo grinned as he thought about what would motivate the slime and anticipated gathering magic stones. He was thrilled to have encountered it. Then, to his slight surprise, Arudo inquired as to whether the slime was indeed a predator. Arudo, meantime, was being seen from behind the mountain by an invisible watcher. Arudo threw a barbecue skewer straight toward the hiding place after noticing the look. He made a quick dodge. Arudo was hit by a swift assault after realizing the creature was moving too quickly for him to follow. He was aware that a barrage of strikes at that speed would be too much for him to withstand. Arudo looked forward and saw a demon rather than a human. He guessed that a burglar had come to steal his magic stones. The person fell just in front of Arudo a few moments later. She grabbed his kebabs and stepped in front of him, showing herself as a female with both human and animal traits. Arudo was completely shocked as he gazed at her. Arudo questioned whether the girl was a monster as he watched her eat his barbecue. After responding that she was a wanderer and a magicka, she asked him who he was. Arudo gave a brief introduction. She didn't appear at all horrible, he thought in private. She actually appeared to be fairly amiable. The girl looked him in the eye. Arudo remarked on how adorable her ears were. After disclosing that she was a member of the squirrel tribe, she asked if he had heard of them. However, she quickly dismissed the subject, stating that she didn't give a damn. Arudo only gave her a curious glance. The girl disappeared from Arudo's view for a little while, before reappearing near the campfire where his supper was cooking. She quickly inquired as to if Arudo would mind if she finished it. Arudo hadn't even heard her request since he was confused by her abrupt movement and the source of her appearance. In the meantime, the slime attempted to take the girl's shish kebab. When Arudo woke up the next morning, the girl was pursuing him. The slime rested on her shoulder. Arudo questioned why. She shot back, saying that because she had to go to the movies and Arudo was still a kid, she would follow him. Then Arudo questioned Majika about if she wasn't a youngster. In response, the girl said that a person was still a child, even if they appear to be an adult. Despite intending to travel alone, Arudo maintained that he was already an adult. Suddenly, Arudo realized it. He turned to Majika and said that in order to speed up time, they should go right now. The girl agreed as Arudo grinned at her. Shortly after, Arudo declared he had seen Kitigris by pointing forward. A huge wall enclosed the scenery of the city in front of them. As they got closer and went through the gate, a girl came up right away and invited them in, promising inexpensive taxes and a spotless record. Kinagris has represented chaos in a diverse range of races since ancient times. This is because the dungeon, which stands tall in the middle of the city, entices people to congregate there. Majika was clearly afraid when she and Arudo entered the city. She acknowledged that this was her first encounter with such a large group of people when Arudo inquired what was wrong. Arudo turned to face Majika and told her that he was a villager. In response, she said that she was homeless. Arudo said that when he initially arrived, he was anxious. Surprised, Majika brought up Arudo's earlier remark that he had never been here before. Arudo explained that when he was around 10 years old, He had gone to see his parents. Recalling how alive the city seemed to him, knowing that prudence was crucial, Arudo looked around and pondered if anything noteworthy would happen in the following 2 years. Almost nothing had changed since then. Then Majika inquired as to his destination. After responding that he had to go to the Adventurers Guild to earn money for their stay, Arudo asked Majika if she would join him. She quickly consented. Arudo announced his plan to trade magic stones as soon as he arrived to the guild. But the man behind the desk turned to face him and said, "Arudo is in the wrong place." Arudo seems taken aback. Arudo was then instructed to leave by the guy, who said that children had no place in the guild. Then Arudo dumped his bag on the counter, exposing a stack of magic stones. Incredulous, the man who had just attempted to brush him off asked where Arudo had gotten so many. In response, Arudo merely stated that he had acquired them via hunting. "This girl standing next to me, whom I defeated, doesn't know how to sell magic stones," Arudo said, pointing to Majika. The man gave Majika a startled glance. She was going to object and claim that she had nothing, but Arudo interrupted her and told her to stop talking. Arudo grinned when he saw that the overall worth came to almost 1990 units. Then the guy told Arudo the precise amount: 2 gold, 29 silver, and 85 copper. Arudo thought that he was completely worn out for such a large amount. He questioned whether his weariness was a result of his quick growth or just his youth. Arudo asked to register as a finder as he put the cash in his backpack. Why would a youngster want to register as an explorer? The guy wondered. Pointing to Majika, Arudo said that she was an adult and that he himself had to register because of a big project. Majika began to speak once again, but Arudo interrupted her, telling the guy to move swiftly because they were running late. Majika turned to Arudo as they were leaving the guild and instructed him to take her and use her. Arudo apologized after requesting explanation. He clarified that it was hard for him to express himself effectively at his age, so he just begged for help. Majika said that it wouldn't enhance his reputation when he inquired whether it wasn't prudent to spend time obtaining magic stones. Majika heard Arudo reject the notion of repute as she walked behind him. He said that improving one's reputation alone does not make one stronger. Majika turned to face Arudo, obviously taken aback by what he had spoken. Walking ahead of Majika, Arudo said they should pick a motel now that they had the money. In addition to offering to part ways there if she had other commitments, he suggested that they have dinner together as a way to express his gratitude for her assistance. Majika consented to accompany him, but only under certain restrictions. They either spend time in his room or give him money. Arudo just instructed her to follow him after hearing this. What a woman she was, Arudo thought to himself. As night fell, Arudo acknowledged that he had first anticipated Majika to decline and expressed his sincere happiness that she had joined him. They conversed while seated in their room. Arudo clarified that his messy look frequently prevented him from taking advantage of several chances, such as the hotel's mouth-watering cuisine. He thought Majika would like it too. Majika was staring at Arudo when he was explaining something to her in their room, and Arudo wasn't sure why. Then Majika said she would take a bath, dismissing his underlying query. When Arudo noticed that she was starting to take off her cloak, he promptly requested that she undress in the restroom rather than in front of him. The slime, obviously exhausted, happily settled into the bed at that point. Majika noted that this was a first for her, as she stood in the restroom getting ready to put on her clothing. After taking a shower, she made the decision to head directly to bed and have a substantial breakfast the next day. She became aware of the pure mana emanating from Arudo as she saw him doing magic. An average individual could not accomplish such a feat. Majika wondered who Arudo really was as she watched him sit on the bed with his eyes closed. She had spent many hours traveling the world in search of a certain person. However, this guy had conveniently joined her a few days prior. As she watched him, she recognized abilities she had never seen and strength beyond his years. To do further research, she had to move closer. He appeared to be hiding something. Surprised by Arudo's mature manner and attitude, Majika remembered all he had said. Is he the one she was looking for? The one who would transform this world? Arudo cannot be the hero since the star prediction stated that the hero will appear in a girl's body. Nevertheless, Majika had an indisputable premonition as she stared at him. She had previously felt that Arudo would be the key to unlocking the doors of a new universe. Arudo was completely worn out from his workout and sound asleep the following moment. As Majika watched him, she saw that when his mana reserves were out, he felt like a dead man. Why does he push himself so hard with training? She asked herself, feeling uneasy. He appeared to be being pursued by someone. From the rooftop, someone observed them. An intruder tried to climb through the open window a moment later. Startled, Majika questioned whether it was indeed a thief. He was hardly noticeable, indicating an extremely low level. She had the option to push him away, but she preferred to see how Arudo would respond. Majika pretended to sleep. The burglar reached for Arudo as he came inside the room. Stirring, Arudo felt behind him, woke up, and politely greeted the stranger in front of him. In response, the robber pulled out a knife and tried to strike Arudo. Without delay, Majika sprung from her bed and yelled at Arudo to use caution. "Don't move," the thief said as the knife froze inches from Arudo's throat. The robber went on to say that Arudo wouldn't be hurt if he acted like an adult. Both Majika and Arudo insisted on learning the thief's intentions. "Did you truly desire cash? How were you ever aware of this location?" The thief was rendered silent by Arudo's pressure. Arudo assaulted the thief instead of speaking. He hit the invader with an air cannon. The invader was propelled, tumbling out the window by the force of Arudo's punch. Majika asked Arudo if he was okay after glancing at him. "Everything was in perfect order," he retorted. Majika saw where the enemy had fallen and knew that Arudo had used an apparently straightforward maneuver to do very sophisticated magic. Such power might be lethal. Majika pondered how much training Arudo must have done to get to this level for his age. When she turned to question Arudo, he had already fallen back asleep. In many respects, Majika believed that this youngster was destined for stardom. Near Arudo's bed, she saw the thief's knife. The two later woke up, went down to the bar, and started eating. Arudo asked Majika whether she thought the meal was good and if she was enjoying it when different dishes were presented to them. Majika said that was the best dish she had ever eaten while her mouth was full. Her speech was a little jumbled. Arudo only advised her to eat slowly. They thanked the workers for the lunch shortly after. After leaving the hotel, Majika thanked Arudo and said she was full. Then, in jest, Arudo assured Majika that she would have eaten enough for 10 people by morning. Then Majika asked what they were going to do next. Arudo said that although he had originally intended to go to the dungeon, the unexpected guest from yesterday had made him reconsider. Now that he had the thief's knife, he was thinking about other places to look. Arudo went to the guild and greeted the people seated close to the door. Two men observed him once again. The merchant who had purchased Arudo's magic stones recognized him and inquired as to whether he was, in fact, the young guy from the previous day. "Are you appraising magic stones today?" Arudo said. The man requested Arudo to come back later if he had business and stated that he was talking with the boss. "This was fortunate timing," Arudo retorted. "Could it be that there's a thief in the guild?" he said, expressing his desire to talk to their superiors. Glancing at Arudo, the boss requested further information and explanation. Arudo clarified that the day before, a strange person had entered their room. The money from the magic stones sold to the guild was obviously the intruder's aim, even though they were successful in frightening him away. The culprit had not searched the room. He was well aware of the whereabouts of the money. He wouldn't have known to look in Arudo's bag otherwise. To put it another way, Arudo deduced that the thief could only have been a member of the guild at the time of our transaction. After concluding his statement, Arudo turned to face his superiors. The supervisor admitted that there was a good chance Arudo would be deducted. The boss turned to face Lion, who was seated right across from him, and said that Lion was in charge. He then inquired as to whether he had seen anything strange. "I wouldn't even know," was Lion's hazy response. Perhaps not." He was urged to speak more clearly by the boss. Arudo watched the conversation in silence. At last, Lion said he hadn't noticed any odd people. Pointing to Mika, Arudo disclosed that she had really succeeded in branding the criminal throughout their interaction. Majika appeared taken aback by what Arudo had said. Arudo then asked that a guy be arrested if the boss saw one with a magic symbol on his hand. Lyons dropped his sleeve somewhat at that point. Arudo said the thief had also lost the knife when he handed it to the boss. While a fine weapon, it should be handed over to the gendarmes as evidence. The boss examined the dagger and said, "True, it will assist them in the search for the thief." Lion abruptly spoke forward and asked the boss whether Arudo might keep the dagger. He maintained that it felt unfair to part with such a beautiful weapon, and that the rules permitted winners to take prizes from vanquished opponents. The boss started to agree, but Lion had already gone up to Arudo before he could finish. Speculating that the dagger was highly valuable, he put it into Arudo's hand, praising its excellence and advising him to keep it safe. Evidently unhappy with the way things had turned out, Arudo attempted to push Lion away. The boss then emphasized the necessity for increased security and urged on calm transactions. Lion requested the employer to trust him, claiming to fully understand. Arudo and Majika then left. Majika went on to say that the individual was a thief. Was it wise to let him go? I wondered. The warnings had been sent, Arudo retorted. The rest is no longer our concern. Was his real goal truly just to acquire a weapon? Magica inquired. Arudo turned to face Magica. Had she seen right through him in a moment of bewilderment? After finishing this duty, he concluded that their adventures had officially begun. As he talked, Arudo stood in front of the dungeon door and looked up at its imposing construction. Following his gaze, Magica acknowledged that she was unable to see its pinnacle. Arudo clarified that this was a fabled labyrinth, one of the biggest dungeons in the world, whose size, provenance, and creators were yet unknown. They were immediately sent to a new place as soon as they entered the portal. According to Arudo, the lower level included the 1st through the 25th levels. This area was mostly used as a training ground for inexperienced explorers and was generally safe. Arudo was explaining this when he heard a loud roar. Abruptly, 2 adventurers in the vicinity reported that a monster had broken free from an upper floor. They yelled that Arudo should run away because his magic would not be sufficient. At that moment, Arudo was directly attacked by a massive horned rat. Others screamed for him to run faster, since they thought he was only a youngster. Arudo spoke the word grave as he faced the oncoming onslaught. The thing instantly fell into a huge hole in the ground. It dawned on Arudo that he had made a mistake. He had overused his authority and put others in danger. Along with everyone else who was stunned by the unexpected development of such a huge hole, magic appeared down. There were no vibrations, but some people thought there could have been an earthquake. Arudo immediately asserted that the floor had just collapsed, apparently by accident. He warned everyone to use caution as they dispersed because the abyss was quite deep. "Why didn't you say that was your doing?" Magica questioned. "They wouldn't have believed him anyhow," Arudo retorted. Hastening to the top levels was preferable. The genuine maze was supposed to start on the 26th floor, when the dungeon reached an intermediate difficulty level. Magica encountered a bear shortly after. She destroyed it with a single strike, and Arudo was amazed. Magica dismissed the praise while sitting next to the carcass, reminding out that Arudo had also engaged in combat. Arudo felt it was time to try it, and pulled the sword from his belt. A skill boost was reported by the system right away. 110 plus dexterity. The boost delighted Arudo, who discovered the dagger was far more powerful than he had anticipated. He thought that this knife would be very helpful when selecting new equipment, and that a correct skill board would allow him to see his progress instead of just feeling it. Arudo knew he couldn't afford to stop, even with such a powerful weapon. He had to confront the bears in front of him in order to get stronger. He decided to go for more difficult opponents, because the monsters on this intermediate level weren't very difficult. Arudo said that their next stop was the upper floor as they departed, and they left after eliminating their present adversaries. Magica just looked at the bears that Arudo had killed. Arudo entered a tunnel and engaged in combat right away. Demons charged at him. Arudo felt sure he could fend them off. The same stones that Arudo had turned into weapons soon crushed the demons. He exhaled in relief as he saw them fall. "We're on the 50th floor, Arudo," said Magica. "The higher level starts here. Only a few elite adventurers can expect to compete in this high-risk area. We must level up considerably while we're still here, since the enemy's power will rise with each floor." As he said, he looked forward. Magica only observed Arudo before turning to face him and questioning why he battled demons in such a routine way. Arudo was completely taken aback. Was there a peculiar method? His eyes gleamed as he enthusiastically requested her to teach him if she knew a better technique. Magica emphasized that the monsters Arudo had just vanquished were powerful enough to pose a threat to even the most experienced explorers. Magica didn't like how effortlessly Arudo had eliminated many demons at once. How he had such strength was beyond her comprehension. She stood in front of him and asked him questions. In response, Arudo inquired as to whether she thought his fighting technique was peculiar. Inquiring as to why he seemed so taken aback by her assessment, Magica affirmed that it surely seemed so from an outsider's point of view. Arudo recognized then that Magica was the second person who had really seen him. Hannah was the only one who had ever looked behind his veneer before. He remembered his former existence. He battled creatures by himself, even at level 99. Because of his low life stat, no one had ever looked at him, while other high-level adventurers drew followers. This was Outworld severe law. Arudo thought now. It seems that Hannah was not the only one who disobeyed this particular commandment. Magica's interest rose at that point, wondering if Arudo was indeed fully human. Arudo told her, grinning, that he was perfectly human. Despite his claim, he told himself that it was difficult to believe because he had died and been resurrected. Magica, delighted by Arudo's smile, repeated what he had said and came up with the excuse that he was just strange. Her remark infuriated Arudo. They resumed their plunge into the cave, once the system indicated a level rise a little while later. Declaring that he could now battle demons from the 50th level, Arudo suggested that they ascend a bit higher. A hazardous creature would be hiding here, according to Arudo's recollections of prior lives. A little ogre materialized in front of them, as though on cue. Arudo remembered how hard it had been for him to kill this monster in a previous life, and he was now interested in how quickly he could do it. Majika commented on the ogre's impatience and desire to kill as they stood in front of it, pointing out that it was more stronger than earlier creatures. She turned to face Arudo and offered to launch a rear attack. Arudo declined, saying he would battle the creature by himself. When Majika heard this, she became concerned that Arudo was not thinking straight. He would die if he made one mistake. In response, Arudo said he was aware of the dangers, but regarded this as an opportunity to determine his actual strength. He moved to confront the monster and drew his knife. Arudo launched an assault and struck the ogre with his sword in the next instant. The monster's skin, he discovered, was remarkably thick like metal. He was still able to hurt it, though. Furious, the ogre slashed Arudo's cheek in retaliation. Arudo reasoned that his blows were effective since he dodged a subsequent hit. He may finally beat the ogre if he kept ducking and striking the same location. However, Majika said, that couldn't just be, as he fell following another blow. But Majika couldn't help but question whether Arudo had really vanquished this monster so easily. After drying himself off, Arudo thought that he hadn't had to exert any effort. Maybe this was the extent of his strength at the moment. Then a big diamond was left at his feet by the muck. Arudo questioned why a monster of this kind would drop such an important gem as he studied it. Something new was indicated by an abrupt change in the atmosphere. Arudo shouted out to Majika at that very time, wondering whether she had heard it. In response, the female directly behind him asked what sound he was talking about. We need to get out of here fast, Arudo advised Majika after realizing the danger. Mega retorted that there was no way out. They would perish if they moved an inch. At that moment, a massive ogre sprang straight out of the cave's depths. Its enormous hand was reaching out to them. Magical Ivy, a low-level parasite monster that drains the power of higher-grade animals it infects, enveloped this green ogre. Arudo turned to face the monster and wondered why it was on the 70th floor. Only 10 stories above did typical ogres start to show up. Arudo didn't even have complete faith in his ability to overcome a smaller opponent. But suddenly there was a huge monster in front of him. He looked at Majika as he put the slime back in the bag and insisted they take advantage of the chance to flee. But Majika vehemently objected. Although she acknowledged the monster's enormous strength, she thought it had a limit. She activated her gloves and readied herself for combat. She had long believed that she was unmatched and had worked relentlessly to become a suitable spouse for the hero she had sought. However, it wasn't until she met Arudo that she realized her earlier attempts were inadequate. Then, determined to win, the girl attacked the monster and began her attack. Majika realized that her blow had little impact once it was delivered. The ogre merely became more enraged and attacked her in retaliation. Majika understood she was faster than the ogre and dodged its punches. It is obvious that one attack would not be enough. She had to let off a few at once. The monster attacked her with Ivy despite her quick, unrelenting strikes, then grabbed her and severely crushed her body. As the Ivy fell away behind her, Arudo deployed an air blade to release the girl. Majika was asked how she felt by Arudo. With a feeling of self-loathing for being rescued by a youngster, she thanked him. Reactivating her power, Majika looked back at the monster. She was aware that everything needed to be let go. She summoned the brightness of 1,000 celestial bodies, calling upon light as an undisturbed shadow. Majika unleashed the item Star Rain and launched a fierce attack on the ogre. She thought the ogre should have died after realizing she had used all of her mana on the hidden spell. However, she noticed the ogre standing uninjured and completely perplexed when the dust settled. Right then, the ogre started lifting its leg right over Majika. Gazing up at it, Majika realized that even though she had given the blow her all, it had not been sufficient. The ogre fell straight to the ground. Arudo hurried over to Majika. When she spotted Arudo in front of her, he grabbed her and told her to leave the rest to him while he bolted. Then he turned to Slime and told it to take care of Majika. Arudo returned to the fight as the slime rose. Arudo knew he had to prevail as he stood in front of the monster. Even though Arudo knew he was no quicker than Majika, he nevertheless hurried forward. However, the ogre's onslaught unexpectedly interrupted Arudo's stream of thought. Majika cried out in desperation when she saw this. Breathless, Arudo reflexively deflected the ogre's punch in an attempt to strike back. Examining his enemy closely, Arudo realized that the ivy was still susceptible to fire, even though it was magical. But he was aware that it would be futile to just burn the vines. Only regeneration would occur. Arudo had to hit the ogre in a way that would actually hurt it. Arudo unleashed another attack, while holding his blade. He knew that it was hard to pierce the ogre's thick skin directly, so he had to target a specific vulnerability. Arudo sent a fireball straight into the ogre's back, while keeping his goal in mind. Slumping to the ground, Arudo saw the effect of his blow. Arudo's eyes clouded the next instant, and he collapsed to the floor. When Magica realized Arudo had triumphed, all she could do was look at the monster in disbelief. Even though Arudo was just a young child, he had vanquished this ogre. Before Magica passed out, these were her final thoughts. When Arudo and Magica opened their eyes, they saw a slime floating just above them. As they lay on the ground, wondering how they had arrived, the sun shone. When Arudo asked whether Rue, the slime, had indeed saved them, Rue responded with a distinctive tongue sound. Arudo praised the slime and gave her a hug, describing her as the world's most trustworthy friend. Arudo turned to face Magica and emphasized the risk of staying unconscious there. They were lucky to have made a full recovery. After remaining silent, Magica apologized and said she would head back to the hotel first. Arudo concurred, adding that he would likewise rest before coming back. Surprised, Arudo gazed at Magica. Is an artifact truly necessary for Magica? In their civilization, artifacts were so sparse that they could be counted on one's fingers. They were sacred instruments made by God. Star Rain was the name of the item that Magica utilized. Arudo recalled that the owner of this relic would pass away in 7 years if his memories from his previous existence were accurate. It was at night. As Arudo sat in the bathtub, he understood that Magica had been using artifact magic all along. The Hand of Justice, an artifact, identified its bearer as someone who possessed 2 particular qualities. Machia extra terra is the 5th criminal element, according to the Vatican. She was labeled an enemy of God along with 5 other individuals. An order for their destruction will be issued later, even though this announcement had not yet taken place. When Arudo asked for the skill scoreboard, a system interface showed up. After examining it, Arudo concluded that Magica's life indicator was probably 4. Arudo had experienced an unbreakable barrier, and her magical energy surpassing his own in the dungeon. She must be incomparably stronger than him, thought Arudo, a glaring difference in their own living levels. Then it occurred to Arudo, but even she will be ruined by the Vatican in 7 years. Arudo started to realize how weak he was in comparison to her as he slid beneath the surface. Could he really alter his destiny? Sadly, Arudo pondered. Arudo was startled out of his bath as slime suddenly materialized in front of him. He wondered whether she needed a bath as well, and questioned what she was doing there already. Arudo got out and started cleaning her when the slime answered in its own tongue. This time, we only escaped thanks to you, said Arudo as he rubbed Rue with a washcloth. The filth was thrilled by his promise to touch her till she showed. She responded in her own tongue, while Arudo massaged the filth. The slime's heels were ticklish, which confused Arudo because he had never considered a slime would have heels. The following moment, Arudo asked whether she usually looked this way when cleaned since the slime was shining so brightly that it nearly blinded him. Arudo asked Rue whether she was content while grinning. Happily, Rue sprang and spoke to Arudo. She appeared to be a puddle the following moment. Arudo softly put the slime back into the water after asking whether she shouldn't be cleaned after noticing this. Arudo discovered he had startled the slime after returning to his chamber from the monopole. Magica materialized at that moment. She got up from the couch and said, "Hello, Arudo." Arudo suggested they should speak outside, as Magica seemed to have something to say. Arudo noticed that she had not spoken since they got back to the hotel when he offered her a drink. Had something actually occurred? Arudo said, "The sunset here is beautiful," as he handed her the drink. They both looked up at the sky. Silently, Magica concurred. She sat silently, clutching her mug, and then turned to face Arudo. "I always thought I'd never lose to a magician," she said. Nobody could match her skill since she had been so self-assured. "Maybe I was overly conceited because of my schooling," she said. "However, I now see that I was weak." Magica looked at Arudo and said, "I want to dedicate myself to solitary training from now on." Living with Arudo would only make her vulnerability worse, Magica stated. She thus desired a different room. "I would never have realized this, then, if I hadn't come with you," she said, glancing at Arudo. She swore, "Next time, I definitely won't lose to you. At our next meeting, I'll try to become stronger than you," she said, turning back to face Arudo. When Arudo heard this, His hands shook, and he started laughing, leaving Majika perplexed as to why he thought it was so funny. She was saying extremely unusual things, Arudo explained. After understanding it had nothing to do with skill, he apologized. All that was said was, no, the most important thing was to try hard. With a clinking mug, Arudo announced that he would not lose either, and that they should reconvene once they were both 100 times stronger. They chuckled, celebrating their present advancement, never realizing that, in spite of their best efforts, there was a force in this planet capable of instantly destroying them. Arudo returned to the motel and started gathering his possessions. He made sure he had everything in his suitcase by checking it. He closed his eyes after taking a quick look at the bed where Majika had slept. He decided to honor his pledge to her as he left the room. He completely immersed himself in training and lost all sense of time after that. Arudo first determined that he needed to improve his crafting abilities. He reached a jungle by consulting his system, realizing it was a perfect location for training. Arudo pondered that it was rich in mana, a crafting ability, and had an abundance of collectible crystals. He started his training by creating mana and shattering stones. He soon obtained control of magic and earned a talent boost. He committed himself to stone mining. His crafting ability soon attained level 20, enabling him to become a blacksmith. As Arudo had predicted, crafting gave him the ability to make objects using resources from the dungeon, such as fire and magic, in addition to offensive skills like Grave Reaper. He was obviously no longer in danger of being pursued from the forge. With a sword in front of him, Arudo became aware that he had unexpectedly learned a new skill from practicing only with it. Arudo realized it was too early to go on to the next level when battling a formidable monster in a cave moments later. The system soon announced that Arudo had exceeded level 40, unlocked a new talent called Two-Handed Style, and mastered the skill art of the sword. When Arudo saw this, he pulled out his sword and used it to attack his adversary. His level rose right away after the fight. Arudo discovered that the Grave Reaper's level increased when he used Typhoon, Grave Reaper, and other attacks. By combining it with magic, he was able to control the cracks that were generated and increase their fatal potency. Arudo's level increased along with his abilities throughout this time. According to the system, Arudo's level was now 40 and all of his skills had improved by 30 units. His ability to manipulate and construct was now at his disposal. Arudo accessed the system window out of curiosity. It defined manipulation as moving an item in a particular direction by absorbing a portion of mana. Arudo began manipulating by pointing his hand at a stone. Though not as ostentatious as Grave Reaper, the stone moved to the side. Arudo thought this ability would be helpful as well. He kept honing the ability. Days became weeks as a result. Winter came soon after. Arudo heard the conversation of the town's residents as he strolled around the city. He heard something amusing. A rumor was being discussed by two guys. Have you heard about the strange person who just showed up on the dungeon's upper levels? He vanquished 1,000 creatures by himself. The second guy said that he had heard the stories, adding that the oddball was just a little child and that for some reason, he was always carrying a low-level slime. Arudo saw they were talking about him as he passed them. They were astounded by what they witnessed. High-level adventurers typically searched the higher levels in groups. After all, realizing that his presence was now being acknowledged, Arudo watched them discreetly. Previously, his low profile meant that no matter what he accomplished, no one noticed him. Maybe, though, something had changed. Arudo thought, looking at the strangers, that he surely didn't like being dubbed a freak. Arudo later told the hotel owner that he wanted to leave his room for 2 or 3 days since he would be returning to the dungeon tomorrow. After warning Arudo to exercise cautious, the proprietor casually inquired about the well-being of the female who had previously been with him. Arudo remembered he hadn't seen Magica since they leased different rooms when he heard the inquiry. The proprietor then said that she was becoming concerned because the girl hadn't come back for a few days. When Arudo heard this, he first thought, "It's Magica," and gripped his jacket. There's nothing to be concerned about. Still, he felt a twinge of unease. A knight on horseback entered the city at that moment. Everyone who saw him commented on how wonderful it was that the Vatican had sent forth its knight. When Arudo heard this, he ran out of the hotel, and the proprietor yelled, "What's wrong?" Arudo remained silent, his thoughts racing with how reality and the future he recalled were suddenly at conflict. Then he realized that everything was correct. Majika had been impacted by his changes as well. But why hadn't he thought of that? Arudo's mind raced. Had the Vatican already given the order to destroy Majika? What if the day she was put to death would come right now? All Arudo could do was hope and pray that Majika was well. Arudo was running past a carriage when someone inside observed him through the window and thought, What a clever boy he is. As they got closer to the dungeon, Arudo fervently hoped Majika was secure. He used his sense of presence, thinking that someone with her level of power would be simple to find, and he hoped he was correct. When he called out to a familiar person, Majika turned and instantly recognized Arudo. "It's been a long time," she said. "How are you doing?" Seeing her power and coming to the conclusion that his concerns were probably unwarranted, Majika asked Arudo why he was breathing so heavily after he told her he was okay, while catching his breath. Arudo pretended to jog casually, since he was unable to acknowledge his terrified worries for her safety. He said he was just going for a run, paused to greet her, and then pretended to go on. Then he took off his scarf and remarked on how cold it was, especially considering what she was wearing. Encouraging her to wear the scarf to prevent a cold, he wrapped it around her. Majika welcomed with gratitude. At that moment, they noticed something in the sky. Perplexed by what they saw, they both looked skyward. Majika acknowledged that it caused her much discomfort, and Arudo characterized it as a black mass. The menacing bulk started to grow, and you could feel its suffocating atmosphere. Arudo called on Majika to evacuate the local residents as soon as he realized the danger was imminent. The dark mass started to break a little while later. Incredulous, Arudo closed his eyes. Standing right in front of them was a demon, a creature with the ability to subdue powerful beasts. Why would it show up in the middle of the city, he wondered. The devil started destroying neighboring homes right away. Until everything around it was burned to ash, the creature would not stop attacking. Nothing would stop it. However, Arudo discovered that he was immobile, exactly as he had been during the fire. His body was numb, and his will was helpless against the unbreakable rules of this planet due to the unbridgeable gap between their life levels. Despite this, Arudo strained his limbs in an attempt to move since he knew that if he stayed frozen, the city would be destroyed. Majika abruptly returned the scarf that Arudo had given her to him. "Everything will be fine," she said. "You could trust me, Arudo." She sprung into action and charged the monster head-on. Arudo was amazed by Majika's extraordinary strength as he looked closely. She was so much stronger now. She was able to strike the demon as she attacked, but it immediately regenerated. Majika understood that he would only need one powerful blow because he was a demon. She was about to utilize Star Rain, her artifact, but the demon ran so quickly that it appeared behind her in an instant. Recognizing his speed, Majika turned around and sidestepped his next blow. She saw that the demon had left her with no way to use the relic. After a little while, Arudo's thoughts were overtaken with Majika, and all he saw was broken pavement. He was unable to understand why he was only an observer and why the previous 8 years had been such a complete waste. He hadn't been reincarnated to see another disaster, a recurrence of his previous life's demise. Mana sparked in his palms due to his intense need. Gazing at the glimmering energy, Arudo pondered whether he might use his paralysis to create magic. If only he could be successful. He turned to face Majika. She battled the extra challenge of the powerful gusts as the monster intensified its onslaught. She would perish from a single direct strike. She was aware that the devil was renewing itself with every blow. She had to wait for the ideal opportunity to use her artifact. Majika launched another attack on the monster, only to be forcefully repelled. She thought this was just not practical. Arudo wouldn't be able to stop it in time, even if he was now gathering mana. A huge fireball was produced by the demon and spun overhead. Looking at it, Majika realized she was going to die soon. Bracing herself for the end, she closed her eyes. Arudo utilized his ability to manipulate at that precise time. When Majika opened her eyes, she saw the demon's fire strike, traveling a great distance. Disbelieving, Arudo gazed at the misdirected assault. Majika questioned if he had actually changed the course of the attack. The devil stumbled at that moment. Majika saw that Arudo was a young man as she glanced at him. Majika sensed her opportunity to strike as the monster landed squarely on her. She heard Arudo yell, "Use Star Rain." She assaulted the monster, injuring it until it vanished. Arudo and Majika thought they had succeeded when they saw it go. Majika hurried over to check on Arudo. Arudo helped him up, explaining that a quick rest would replenish his power and that he was only weak from the level up. Arudo didn't comprehend Majika's actions as she placed him on her back. She was adamant about bringing him to the hotel. She argued that he had already done so much for her and begged to be let to do at least this when Arudo implored her not to. Later, when they ran away, Majika said she had never seen a method like his. When Majika mentioned his ability to manipulate, Arudo clarified that he had developed it since their previous meeting. He gave an example by adjusting his scarf such that it appeared on Majika right away. Upon noticing this, Magica inquired as to whether he had done so. In response, Arudo said that he could use mana to transfer items whenever he wanted. As a result, he could deflect and reroute assaults, alter the direction of wind attacks, and, with training, manipulate opponents like puppets. Magica said it was an amazing talent, but Arudo clarified that he was immobile while using it and that he could never have vanquished the demon on his own. Then, flushing, he addressed Magica directly and gave her credit for rescuing the city. Magica stated that she believed they both made an effort. Arudo responded with a laugh. Recalling the demon's most recent defeat, Arudo had a notion. The city would be destroyed if these occurrences persisted. He came to the conclusion that someone must have conquered it, because he couldn't remember ever hearing of such an occurrence. Who could be strong enough to defeat such a demon? Arudo thought. As they sprinted over the rooftop, he felt an aura at that moment and begged Magica to halt. Magica turned to face Arudo and explained they still hadn't arrived at their goal, but Arudo urged they halt right now. Magica abruptly paused, pausing in the middle of her stride on the roof. With his dark attire and the terrible mana emanating from him, as though he were not from this world, Arudo recognized the person as soon as he looked down. In a past life, Hannah was murdered by this magician. Gamagan was the man in front of Arudo. He stood there, averting his gaze. Magica saw that Arudo had a worried expression on his face that she had never seen before. Who was the man, she inquired. In response, Arudo said it was Gamagan Salway, one of Euphonia's 12 commanders. Magica believed that she had heard of him after hearing this, because Gamagan was regarded as the world's most powerful magician. Magica asked Arudo what he was doing as he started to gather his magic while she was thinking about this. Arudo became enraged and declared that she didn't care since he had to murder the magician. Arudo was halted by Magica, who questioned whether he really planned to fight in this condition. Arudo was already staring at Magica when she grabbed his hand and informed him that he would not be able to defeat this magician since he was too weak following his level up. All Arudo wanted was that she release her grip. In response, Magica asked Arudo to settle down and take a seat. Didn't he understand? She yelled. He couldn't win now, in an attempt to persuade him. When Arudo realized Magica was correct, he relaxed. He couldn't beat the magician in his current condition. Arudo had a sense of melancholy as he leaned on the rooftop. The magician stood watching his creation in the meantime. Then a man next to him questioned whether he, Mr. Gamagan, was truly accountable and what it meant that he had called forth the demon. Gamagan retorted that it was accurate. He intended to try a rare summoning item he had obtained, but it didn't work. Only a low-ranking ogre could be summoned by the device. Unfortunately, before I had a chance to intervene, someone had already defeated it without difficulty, he said, shattering the item in his hands. The guy behind the magician pointed out that a small state may be destroyed by the power of even such a minor demon. Only royal instructions are obeyed by Euphonia's 12 commanders. Protecting the nation is their responsibility. Such behavior is just not acceptable. Gamagan turned to face the man at this point, raised him, and used magic to bind his neck. Gamagan questioned the suspended individual about why he felt compelled to express his views on these issues. He had undoubtedly not thought that it could be preferable for him to keep his thoughts to himself. The man apologized passionately, gasping for breath. The young man fell to the floor. The magician then gave the order for his carriage, stating that he intended to go back to the capital and carry out more investigation.